Welcome to Breaking Down Patriarchy. I'm Amy McPhie Allebest. A few days ago, I got a text out of the blue from a guy friend who wanted to talk about some emotionally charged topics. I did not want to have the conversation. This guy had a history of not being a good listener, and I was also really stressed by some other things that were going on for me at the time, and I was not in a great headspace. So when I saw his text, I took probably 10 minutes carefully crafting a reply that affirmed our friendship, but told him that I wasn't going to engage in the conversation at that time. I sent the text and then noticed that my whole body was shaking with anxiety about how he would respond to my very polite no. And you know what? That wasn't entirely unfounded. This guy replied back immediately, no 10 minutes of careful wordsmithing from him. And it was the rudest, most disrespectful communication I have received in a long time. So I went into a panic and ended up soothing his feelings, telling him everything was okay, that I cared about him so much, and that we could talk about it at a later time when we saw each other in person. I was so kind. And I was so mad afterward. I had fallen into the behavior pattern that I have been taught since before I can even remember. Keep other people happy, especially men, at all costs. I am actively trying to rewire my brain to recover from this kind of people pleasing. But sometimes I don't quite know how. And when something comes up in the moment that I'm not prepared for, I just revert to that prior training. So I was thrilled to discover the work of therapist Sara Fisk, who is an expert specifically in helping women to stop people pleasing. And I'm so happy to have Sara with us today. Welcome, Sara.
It is totally an honor. I am a huge fan and just it's so great to be here.
So excited for this conversation. I wonder if we can start by having you introduce yourself to listeners, kind of personally tell us where you're from, tell us some of the factors in your personal life that brought you to the place that you are today.
Absolutely. I live in Arizona in a suburb of Phoenix. I am uh, technically Latina. And I say that because I also was raised in the Mormon church. And it's interesting to come to understand later that my culture growing up was not my Mexican heritage. It was really like the church. That was our culture. And so part of one of the things that I have worked on lately is like really feeling into that cultural background. I have 5 kids. I am a wife and mom, and I love those roles most of the time. I am a coach, and I came to this work like 100% autobiographically. I was the most complete people pleaser and codependent perfectionist, all of the things. I really struggled to do anything that I wanted to do for myself. I felt completely lost and consumed in my roles. And I will say that a lot of the time that I felt like that was good and right. But when there were a lot of issues that I looked at inside of Mormonism that just didn't feel good to me anymore, and when I decided to leave the church, that's when all of it just came up because I was a 42-year-old woman going to church because I was afraid to tell my parents that I didn't want to go anymore, and
Mhm.
just felt so kind of hemmed in on every side by other people's expectations, by God's expectations. And really, if I am being completely honest, when I tried to feel into, okay, but Sara, who are you? What do you want? It didn't feel like there was anything there. I was
Mm.
really just fulfilling a bunch of roles for other people all day, every day, and that really obscured anything about me that I felt really deeply connected to.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm just thinking of listeners listening to this, like, so what did you do? What did you do next? How did you learn this stuff? But that's going to be kind of the conversation today, right? Or
Yeah,
is there
yeah.
more that you want to share about your story and how you got from there to where you are now?
No, that is the conversation I hope we have today because
Okay.
as I have now worked, I've been coaching for almost 6.5 years. That is the story of womanhood in general.
For
I
sure.
mean, I think high demand religion puts kind of a unique twist on some aspects of that, but universally, if you are a woman who is raised in a Western patriarchal capitalist society, you are rewarded for losing yourself, overgiving, overdoing, and that actually works for a little while. You feel very rewarded. I felt very rewarded inside of Mormonism. And I had, that proximity to some power and influence, which is really all that Mormon women get. But it felt fulfilling for me. I felt like I was doing it right. I felt like God was happy with me. And that works until it doesn't. And that process of like feeling it not work anymore and really kind of digging inside, who am I? What do I want? I think that's pretty universal for women, no matter where and how they grow up.
I think you're right. It's why we both do the work we do, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really why. Okay, well, let's start with the most basic definition, right?
Yeah.
How do you define people pleasing?
I define people pleasing as having the internal experience of not having a choice.
Mm. Hmm.
Not having a choice to do what I want to do. I have to do what you want. I should, I ought, I must. And so when I don't have the choice to do what I want, I abandon myself and I just do what other people want. So it's this internal experience of not having a choice.
And you say, I know I was looking at your blog the other day, which is fabulous, highly recommended to listeners, and I'll have you share all of the ways that listeners can find your work at the end of the conversation. But I was looking at your blog, and I even just learned so much reading what you wrote there about people pleasing being a maladaptive
Yes.
tendency that you develop at a young age. I was like, yep, yep, yep,
Oh,
yep.
it's
Was it
baby. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, where does it come from? How does it develop over time? And why does it feel good, like you said? Because it does sometimes. And maybe there are appropriate times for it to be like doing something that somebody else
Oh, yeah.
hopes for or wants to is appropriate sometimes, but sometimes it's not. So, how do you tease
Yeah.
those things
Yeah.
apart?
You're exactly right. And I just want to say with this statement that I make all the time, the problem is not that we people please,
Hmm.
because it's actually a part of connected, loving, safe relationships. The problem is that we don't know how to not people please when that is what would better serve us.
Yeah.
And so, with that statement, let's kind of just go back to the beginning. Babies come into this world completely dependent on the big people, right?
Yep.
That's just how this existence has been set up. And so, a baby has a biologically programmed cry. They cry, and someone hopefully comes and changes them, cuddles them, feeds them, helps them go to sleep, connects with them. And so, that first, before they even understand that they are a separate human, they get this like idea that, okay, I do something and there's a response, and
Hmm.
hopefully a good response. And so as they grow up and all those mirror neurons come online and they're constantly scanning around, watching the faces of the big people, they start to know, okay, there are some things that they like and some things that they don't like. If you've ever been in a room when a baby smiles, what does everybody do? Oh my
Smile back.
gosh, she's
Yeah.
smiling, she's smiling. And the baby's like, they like that, right? That
Mm.
it lights them up. They get hugs, they get cuddles. And that is as much survival based as
Yep.
anything else. And so then baby grows, and then there's more people who like different things and who don't like other things. And adults respond. I mean, I remember sitting in church actually with, my daughter, and she slapped my face as babies do when they're learning how, limbs and hands work. And I grabbed her hand and I said, no. And I pushed her body away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And what did she start to do? She cried, right? She dissolves into
Cry.
tears because I had punished her in her, like to me, it wasn't a punishment. I was just
Yeah.
being a good mom. But to her little baby body, that was a punishment. My voice, my eyebrows going down into a menacing, stare, and then the separating. So that's what babies pick up. They like
Mhm.
this and I get rewarded. They don't like this and I get punished.
Mhm.
And so then there's just more and more people. There's church leaders and coaches and teachers and the school lunch ladies and all of these little mirror neurons that are meant to be there to facilitate safety and connection do what they do. They pick up all of this information about how I have to behave to be safe and to feel connected, to
Mhm.
belong.
Mhm. So if we have to do that for survival, then how does it become maladaptive?
It becomes maladaptive in some kind of sneaky ways because these big people who we want to connect with and feel loved by, they also prize their own comfort over ours sometimes.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
you're at a family party and the creepy uncle wants a hug and kiss and your mom is embarrassed because you won't just obey, and she says, I don't care what you think. You get over there and you give him a hug and a kiss. And so at young ages, all of us learn I have to stuff down this feeling of discomfort or not wanting to, and I have to do what they say so I
Mhm.
don't get in trouble. I have to finish the food on my plate, even though my body is telling me, like that was a big rule in my house. If
Mm.
you served it, you ate it. And so my body is telling me I'm full, and my dad is saying, you can't get up until you finish your food. And
Mm.
so there are hundreds of ways that we teach young children that they have to push down their own discomfort or their own feeling of like, this isn't right. I don't like this to obey. And we separate children from the sensations in their body that are meant to give them the relevant information about how to be safe and how to feel connected. And they have to opt out of feeling to obey.
Mhm. Because obedience does mean safety and being
That's right.
liked, right? Being approved of, especially by those people that keep you safe, but also the people that you genuinely love. And that's
Exactly.
right. That's parents, but that's also, like you said, church leaders, or it's like it's all the people in your community. And
It
especially now
is.
we're going to talk about patriarchy, right? Like how
Yes.
this is specifically gendered, because I know all humans can fall into the people pleasing trap. We all do.
Right. Mhm.
But I do want to talk about how gender plays into it. And I'll ask an obvious question, but I want you to like really dig in. How does patriarchy contribute to women specifically becoming people pleasers?
Part of the obvious answer to this is that humans who are socialized as boys, they have some off ramps, right? From
Mm,
the purely people pleasing experience. The whole boys will be boys. Their risk taking and their authority challenging is seen as developmentally appropriate. They're going to be good leaders.
mm,
They're going to be, important, men in their field. While girls, the behavior that is rewarded over and over and over again is being quiet, not rocking the boat, going along, being nice. So in very young, we start to, because of patriarchy, reward behavior in boys that gives them access to more freedom and more choices. And we reward behavior in girls that keeps them compliant and
mhm,
keeps them nice and keeps them, not rocking the boat.
mhm,
And when you think about just the history of patriarchy, so much of which I learned from you, right? I was born in 1973. That was the year that women could get a loan,
yep,
right?
mhm,
Without their husband's co-signing on it. And so my mom, until I was born, literally had no access to financial capital unless she could get a man to agree with her. And so she had to be nice. She
yeah,
had to not rock the boat. Her whole financial ability to exist in the world was dependent on men. And there are hundreds of laws and ways that our social structure was set up that made women dependent on men. And that meant we had to be kind, we had to be good, we had to keep our marriage. And, it was never the case that a woman could just decide to get a divorce and go find a different husband. I mean, it did happen, but that would be very difficult, where women were the disposable, replaceable gender all the time because a man held all the power.
Hmm. For sure. Let's dig in. You mentioned financially, and you gave one example of that, and like in the home. I do want to touch on religious patriarchy too, just because
Yeah,
it's like so overt, it's
right.
so obvious. So can let's just explore a little bit some things that you can trace, like it's that to scripture and culture that give women the very, very clear message that you need to please men. Like this is
Yeah.
not a subtle thing. It's right in the doctrine for a lot of religions. What pops to your mind in
Um,
that category?
in in our kind of shared religious tradition, there are songs that we sing about
Mm,
how obeying the prophets is what will keep you safe,
mhm,
right? Hearkening to the words of men who are quote unquote chosen by God, air quotes there, um, is the way to be considered righteous and good. And
mhm,
it is in so many religions, the degree of faithfulness that you have is measured by your obedience to the laws that come from God, that come from the scriptures, that come through, if you have in a religious tradition that believes that there are men on earth who speak for God, it's by listening to and obeying them. In
mhm,
Mormonism, like literally the number of children that you are willing to have, the things that you are willing to endorse or not endorse. I was at BYU when a religious leader named Boyd K. Packer talked about how, the enemies of the church were homosexuals, feminists, and intellectuals. And in my, maybe 19-year-old mind, I was like, oh, that's the worst thing you can be. And so
mm,
I put a lot of time and energy into not understanding and being deliberately ignorant because I thought it was the right thing to do. So religious patriarchy shapes what you are allowed to believe, what the questions you are allowed to ask, the position you are allowed to have, and you are rewarded for upholding the structure and the system.
mhm. And thus, yes, like that's why it feels good too, because if you're a baby and then a little kid, like, and they're like, these are the rules, and the rules will make you happy and the rules keep you safe, then of course you're going to feel good keeping the
That's
rules.
right.
I'll say too, like even just under all of it, fundamentally, and this is in the entire Judeo-Christian and Muslim tradition, the creation story, there is so
Yes.
much power in the stories that people tell about where
Yeah.
humans come from, because it tells us who we are and what God expects us to be, right? And so the fact that in that story that women learn that they were created to help men, to please men, to be an assistant and a sidekick, and really secondary to men. Women learn that, and so we're handed that script. So we're like, okay, well that's how I'm supposed to be a good woman, right?
Yeah.
And men learn it. And men learn it too.
Yes.
Men learn like, okay, I mean, and even if it's not like explicitly connected, like see how Adam is primary. See how Eve was created to please Adam. So therefore that's your place in the world. They just see it everywhere. And so I feel sometimes, I mean, I do have compassion for men growing up too who do have this, it feels innate expectation of like, well, the girls and the women are supposed to, like, we're supposed to move to where my job is. Like, didn't we
Yeah.
all agree on this? And they don't even know why they have that expectation, or like, wait, why are you doing it that way? Why are you disagreeing with me? You're making it so hard, because the default has been absorbed into both parties their whole lives of like, wait a second, like, you know what I mean? And in some families, in some communities, in some cultures, it's more explicit than in others, but we are all swimming in that water, and it sets everybody up for a lot of frustration. And sometimes they don't even know why. It's just because it's just inherent in all of that messaging. And for me, going back to those like fundamental scriptures of really male primacy and women's subservience just, it's not it doesn't get more explicit than that, I feel.
It's so true. It's so true. And all of the things that kind of come out from that, I'm really trying to kind of understand my own journey through perimenopause right now.
Yeah.
And and in doing research, just realizing all of those every religious tradition has the teaching that women are unclean
Yes.
when we are menstruating or when we have just
True.
given birth. And so all of the little kind of teachings that come out of that about women's being one down all the time, no matter
Mhm.
what is happening,
Mhm.
what are natural biological processes. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I'm wondering too, since you mentioned natural biological processes, and so that has me thinking about like our nature, our human nature. An image that just popped into my mind is that incident where the head of soccer in Spain kissed the soccer player, this woman soccer player, completely with no warning and out without her consent, just right on the mouth. And how did you watch the video of it? But
I
like
did
when it actually happened?
I didn't watch the video, but I'm familiar with the story.
Yeah, I watched the video and you just watch her like freeze
Yeah, yeah,
and then she moves along and then it's not until afterwards that she's like, "What the F," right? But
yeah.
I want to ask you about that too, like the biological component
Hmm.
of men just being bigger and stronger and our
Yeah,
intergenerational female trauma of
yeah.
being attacked and raped by men. How do you think that plays into the people pleasing too?
One of the things that I wish I could just put in the water so that everybody understands, especially women, is that we are not in charge of how our nervous system responds
Mm,
to attack or surprise. And so maybe that kiss didn't feel like an attack, but certainly it was a surprise. And our nervous system is a complex, I think of it kind of like, just a system of buttons and levers where they really quickly calculate what is my best chance of surviving this incident. And with my dignity intact, with, not damaging relationships that I know are important to my success, to my financial future. I mean, if he's her
mhm.
coach, there's some financial tie there. What is my best chance of surviving this? And then your nervous system just picks a response:
Yeah.
fight,
Oh.
flight, freeze, or fawn, or
Mhm.
some combination, right? And so that she froze in the moment, she had no choice over that response. And we so often blame, like, well, if you didn't like it, why didn't you say something in the moment? That's
Mhm.
because her nervous system has gone into a freeze response and has to regulate again, even for the part of her brain that helps her understand and make sense of what happened, to come back online and be like, wait a second, I didn't ask for that. That was inappropriate. I didn't like that. And because we misunderstand how the nervous system works, we blame victims for not having the appropriate response in the moment that it happened when they didn't have a choice.
Hmm. Yeah. So, how would you tell men? And I know there's lots of conversations around consent and making sure that boys and men are now trained. I think maybe it's kind of partly for that reason, too, because I think a lot of boys and men until recently have been quite ignorant of that imbalance of power. Well, at least good boys and men, right?
Yeah, yeah,
How do you coach boys and men to be aware of that? That women may have been not may have been. They have.
have
Any
been.
girl or woman you know has been trained to please you, whether you know that or not. I mean, do you talk to men about this
Yeah.
also?
It has been a big conversation, especially just between my husband and I, because
Mm,
here's here's something that needs to be said. When you stop people pleasing, there will be people who don't like it.
mm,
And those might be people who love you because they are used to this old dynamic where you defer or you are silent. And when you begin to stop those behaviors, it's going to create like a, hey, what's happening here? And let me just use a personal example. I have had a habit for a lot of years of, if I have an opinion and my husband has an opinion about something, I defer to him. I have done a lot of deferring, even though in my mind I'm like, that's not going to work because of this or this or this. I'm like, fine, we'll try it your way. And then I'm resentful later because I was like, I knew it. I knew that wasn't going to work. And he's like, why didn't you say something? And in the moment, I'm like, why didn't I? And it's because of this training. And so I have said to him, listen, in the moment of decision making, my habit is to defer to you. And so if you could ask me directly, like, what do you think? Like, what is your actual opinion here? That would just help me feel more comfortable, like taking the focus off of you and putting the focus on me so that I can even ask myself, what do I think here? What do I think would be best? Because I'm just so used to the focus being on you that I don't, I'm still learning to do that. And so we had that, discussion a while ago. I'm still working through it. I still find myself like feeling resentful because I wanted something and didn't speak up because I deferred to him. And I think it's a combination of asking for what you need. Like, I need you to help me slow the conversation down and ask me what I want and give me some time to think about it. And then the rest of it is me learning what it feels like to connect to myself, to kind of shut out all of the other, voices and opinions, and really be honest and connected to what I do want, and then find the words to say it, however uncomfortable that is.
Hmm. That's so relatable, that story, Sarah. I've totally done the same thing in my marriage and have had just such similar conversations where, yeah,
Yeah,
my husband is like, what? Why didn't you, like, he doesn't want me to just defer. He didn't know I was
right,
doing that.
right,
And that's what, I guess that's what I was kind of like referring to when I said, like, I think both couples, especially within very patriarchal contexts, a heterosexual can start a marriage, or a heterosexual couple can start a marriage not even realizing that they're
right.
bringing those attitudes and expectations. So another question I have that's kind of in this vein, and I'd love you to share some more anecdotes too, is like, what's the difference
Yeah.
between true kindness, where you're like, yeah, I'll go, like, kindness, I want to do something thoughtful for you, or I know that's important to you, and I am going to be nice. What's the difference between that in a healthy way and people pleasing? And I guess what you said before was like feeling like you have to do what you don't want to do
Right.
is a big difference. But can you kind of flesh that out a little bit more?
Absolutely. So, again, just referencing that definition, it's all about your internal experience, which is why I say you can't tell if something is people pleasing on the outside. Because you and I could be in a
Mm,
friendship and I show up to your house with cookies and you have no idea what I'm feeling internally. Maybe I'm worried because you haven't texted me back and I'm like, I have to do something so that Amy thinks I'm valuable. I make really good cookies. I better get over there so that I can see if we're still friends, right? Because I'm anxious and worried all the time about losing her friendship.
hmm.
Or I could be like, hey, I made these cookies. I know you like them and I just wanted to share. So we have such there is such an internal beauty to our emotional landscape and experience that so many women are not familiar with because we are rewarded for having our attention out all the
Mm,
time. These like tentacles that are attached to everybody else. What does he want? What does she need? What can I do for you? And so taking some of that attention and turning it back in, you will know with practice and attention to yourself, why am I doing this? And I'm not even going to say that acting out of duty or obligation is wrong, because the second, part of that is, number one, what am I feeling? Number two, why am I doing this? What are my reasons? And if I like my reasons for showing up to do something dutiful, okay, here's a great example. My parents, about every other week, something goes wrong on their computer.
Okay.
right? And they're like, they call and they're like, this thing used to work, it doesn't work anymore. And so do I want to go over to my parents' house and show them how to reset their password for the, no. But I like my reason for doing it, right?
Mm,
It's a little, obligation, maybe duty fueled, but I want to show up for them. I want them to have access to the information on their computer, and so I'm going to go do it. Do I love it? No, but I don't have to love it. As long as I know my reasons and I like them. And that's the part
mm,
of our internal experience that we often don't have a lot of connection to when we are just stuck in people pleasing, because it's about everybody else's experience, everybody else's emotions. And so the difference is, what am I feeling when I do this, and what are my reasons?
hmm. Yeah, and I love how you said that you can't tell from the outside what a person's reasons are and why they're choosing them. So correct me if I'm wrong. We're just gonna like do this little exercise. So if you have those reasons and you feel good about it and you're like, this is something I want to do for my parents as a daughter, even though it's not
Yeah,
fun, I still choose
right.
to. The unhealthy people pleasing way or motivation might be they won't love me anymore if I don't, right? Or like they will think I'm selfish or they'll think
Right.
I'm ungrateful. Because what you're saying is like you're then being motivated by what they will think, and I have to do these actions in order for them to have these thoughts about me and for them to like me. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly right. And then just the last thing that because this programming is so deep, the last thing I would say is also just notice if you're always choosing to go do
Yeah.
things for other people.
Yeah.
Because I think we can also subtly hide from ourselves that, no, no, I just really like to do this. I just really want to. Because most women, when I talk about like, hey, what would your life be like without people pleasing? They think they're going to be selfish and self
Mhm.
centered and mean, and that their needs and their wants are going to be the only ones that matter.
Mhm.
And they're so used to living in the reverse, right? That everybody else's needs matter and they're below everyone else. They think that the opposite is true when they don't people please, that their needs are the only ones that matter. And what I really am after for every woman is just equal. Like sometimes
Mm.
my needs matter and sometimes yours do. Sometimes I pick me, sometimes I pick you. And so if you're always picking the other person and still doing things for them, I think that would also just be something to take a look at, because equity in relationships means you matter too. You are deserving of your own time, energy, effort, exploration in creating the life that has you a part of it as well.
Mhm. Okay, this is so helpful and so relevant. Let's say now that I just realized I'm a chronic people pleaser. Let's just use this as an example. I'll be like a proxy for anybody listening who's relating to this. I've just realized, like, oh, wow, I've been a chronic people pleaser my whole entire life for decades. It's been affecting my life negatively, but the habit is so entrenched. I don't know how to stop. And let's say I tried out this thing, and you've already said, like, when you change the dynamic, it's likely the other person isn't going to like it because neither person is used to it, right? So, how do you coach people through that process and maybe developing the distress tolerance that will inevitably come when I disappoint somebody? And let's say it is somebody who's really, really important to me, like my dad or my husband, like a family member, a really close friend who is used to me deferring, soothing, doing all the work in the relationship. And I decide to rock the boat, and I'm flooded with cortisol and all the chemicals that make us feel like we're going to die. How do you coach people through that process, like specifically so that they can stick it out and start forming new habits?
Great question. And I just want to go back to what you said. This is about distress tolerance. And here's how I like to say it. When you are stuck in people pleasing, it is distressing. You're
Mm-hmm.
saying yes to things you don't
True.
want to say yes to. You're overwhelmed. You're overthinking. You're beating yourself up. you're worried about what other people are thinking of you, you're overgiving, right? That is distress, but it is kind of the distress that's the wallpaper that we're just so
Mm.
used to. So the first thing I have women do is assess like how much time, energy, effort, brain space, and resources are you spending people pleasing? And for most women, it is 3 to 5 hours a day. And here's what I
Oh.
mean by that.
Woo.
Their brain is replaying all of the instances where they didn't say what they wanted to, and now they're worried about what somebody thinks of them. They're rethinking and doubting themselves and criticizing and judging, or they're overthinking decisions, not realizing, not believing that they know how to make good decisions. And so there is a lot of time and energy and effort that is just kind of leaking out all the time. And that amounts to thousands of hours of non-renewable resources, time, energy, and brain space. I mean, no wonder we're so tired, right? It's our
Yeah.
brains that are constantly going. So that's the distress of people pleasing. And once we really understand, like, that is my actual like life, that's my time, that's my energy, that's the ingredients with which I create my life that is just being flushed down the toilet because I don't get a return on that. Because all that does is reinforce that I'm going to be the people pleaser. I'm going to
Mm.
defer. I'm going to soothe. I'm going to pretend or perform. And so really seeing that that is the state of this distress sometimes makes the distress of not people pleasing look a lot better, a lot more attractive, because now what I have to do is I'm already distressed. I just have to learn how to tolerate a different kind of distress.
Yeah.
I have to learn to tolerate like the panic of saying no, or the discomfort of saying, I don't want to do that and I don't have time for that, or the worry of expressing my true opinion and knowing that other people might think differently about me. And I always suggest that you start with lower risk situations first.
Hmm.
So maybe you're not going to tell your dad, right? That for, in my case, probably the the conversation that just took all of my skills was when I told my parents that if they continued to try and talk to my daughter about being gay in a way that signaled that they did not approve, that they were unhappy with her choices, that they would not be welcome in my home anymore. I would have never imagined being able to have that conversation in a very civil, very what I thought was respectful way, had I not practiced on 100 other lower risk conversations before.
Hmm.
And lower risk is just dependent on each person. I have worked with a client who she went to the same Starbucks on her way to work every single day. Four out of 5 times she got the wrong drink. And she was like, well, I guess I'll just take it. Right.
Oh no.
And for her to
Oh, that
push
was
the
a
drink back
yeah.
across the counter and say, this isn't what I ordered. Can we try that again? It almost sent her into a panic. But that was a lower risk
Yeah.
situation that she could take on first before talking to her dad. So
Mm.
start with lower risk situations first. And then I can go into that a little bit more if you'd like.
I would actually keep going. This is so,
Okay.
so helpful. Yeah.
So the first thing that you have to do, there has to be a pause in the habituated behavior. So,
Hmm.
for example, I go into Starbucks, I get the wrong drink. My habit is, okay, fine, I guess this is just what I'm getting today. I take it and I leave. And then I feel bad. I feel resentful. I feel like I don't matter. I feel like nobody sees me, right? That carried on into the day with her. And so I have to pause for a second and remember, okay, I'm trying a new skill. So what we worked on was she would see the drink coming toward her. She would see that it was the wrong one, and she would go to the bathroom. She wouldn't pick it
Hmm.
up immediately. And she would
Hmm.
just take a little pause, go into the bathroom, connect with her body, like physically put her hands on her body and say, you're safe. It is safe to do this. I'm right here with you. We're going to do this together, right? Because inside each of us is that scared little person, that little
Mhm.
girl, or so, socialized as a girl part who's like, I am terrified about what is going to happen if I say no. So she calms that part. She goes back out, and now has interrupted the habit, and she can make a different choice. The other thing that is really helpful, and that situation, we were able to turn that around pretty quickly. But if after you pause and after you connect with yourself, you have to really be honest about what is going to happen. If I take the drink, I'm going to feel terrible for the rest of the day. And I'm going to reinforce this behavior. If I don't take the drink, I'm going to feel panicked for a minute.
Mhm.
But I choose to feel panicked on purpose because that's the direction that I want to go in. And so you have to choose after you kind of do some predicting about how is this, I could people please here or I could not. What moves me in the direction that I want to be going? And then you choose on purpose because you like your reasons.
Mhm.
And then it's a matter of just practicing,
Mhm.
practicing, practicing, practicing. So pausing, connecting with your body and helping yourself to feel safe, looking at your different options and kind of predicting. That's something that we never do, which is why so many of us people pleasers, we're volunteering to run the school carnival and we're thinking, how did this happen to me? How did I get here? It's because
Mhm.
we didn't pause and predict, like, if I run the school carnival this year, it's going to take 5 hours of my time. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And once we really know the cost, that gives us a lot more reasons to say, you know what, it's not the year for me to do that. Thanks for thinking of me.
Mhm.
And then once we get into a habit of pausing, connecting, and predicting and knowing our reasons, then we just have to practice.
Mhm. Okay, so let's use that example of the school carnival. Let's say this person has planned the school carnival for years, or they've done other things at the school and they're like, "Oh, we can count on her." And that's part of like a pride of like, I'm a person who contributes to my school and my community and everybody really likes that about me and I like it about myself. However, for reasons A, B, and C, this is going to
Mhm.
have a huge cost for me this year. So let's say I try saying no and I get pushback. Like, and so you prepare for it, like, okay, I'm going to have panic when I say no. And then
Yeah,
let's say the worst case scenario does happen. And like everybody looks like, oh my gosh, that's so selfish. And like, you actually totally do have time. We all work full time and you don't, or whatever the reasons are, or whatever.
right, right.
So then how do you, I mean, I guess these are just like the tools of distress tolerance and self-soothing. Because
It
you
is.
might lose relationships over it. It's so hard.
Right,
Ew.
right.
Yeah.
I totally understand, and that, yeah, I feel that. Here's what matters. Like, number one, I think it's helpful to have at least some acceptance, possibly even compassion, when other people are upset. For
Mhm.
example, if I've always been the one to do the carnival, it makes a lot of sense to me that people are going to be upset when I don't. And
Mhm.
when I am alone, I can do some things with myself to be like, you know what, it makes sense. I always do it. I'm pretty fabulous at this. I understand that me not doing it is going to mean that somebody else has to. It makes sense. So that I go into the conversation being able to have some capacity to understand, like, I get why this is upsetting to you. I
Mhm.
understand that. And I have found that when I do that beforehand, I can say to whoever I'm disappointing, like, I get it. I know being disappointed sucks. And I appreciate you being willing to hear me out on this, but it's not something I'm going to do. I can actually have both things at the same time: compassion for them. Like, I understand why this is disappointing and upsetting to you, and I can still hold my ground. That was
Mhm.
exactly the dynamic that I had with my parents in that conversation. I could
Mhm.
say to them, I understand why this is distressing to you, that you have a grandchild who is gay. I get that. And I will not be changing my mind about this.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that's the first thing that I would say is just spend some time in a compassionate stance, because compassion doesn't mean you're going to change your mind. Too often we conflate the two. If I
Yeah.
understand you, it means I have to give in to you. Those are
Yeah.
not the same. And then number two, you might need to pause again, right? If it gets really heated, you might need to say, this is getting really heated. I want to take some time and think about this. Why don't we revisit this next Thursday? Not because you're going to change your mind, because you're going to spend some time strengthening and connecting. And one of the most valuable tools that I teach inside, my work with clients is I have a specific process for finding the exact words that you want to say and practicing them using mental rehearsal so that your body can feel the distress beforehand and practice it. And so that's what I would do is
Mm.
practice the words you want to say, get really clear on them, memorize it like a little script, and then play the movie of you going back to the meeting on Thursday. You see yourself standing up and saying, I'm really touched by your, I value being kind. So I would
Mhm.
probably say something like, I am so, that you are all fans of how I run the carnival means a lot to
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
and it's not something I have time for. And then
Mhm.
watch yourself mentally doing that over and over and over again. That anxiety is going to come into your body, that fear, and you're going to watch yourself take good care of yourself. And then that prepares you to go back again for round two, if that's what it takes.
Mhm. Oh, I love it, Sarah. That's so great. I'm just thinking, yes, kindness is so important to me too. And I think it should be. I think it should factor in.
Me
The
too.
thing I think something that is tricky and that I'm just learning now at this age is just through experience when I look at the relationships in which I have been a complete people pleaser. Um I feel like I'm being kind. I feel like I'm being kind in the moment, but over time, it has damaged the relationship to the point that I can start losing my compassion for the person. And
Yeah.
so in the long run, it's actually not the kind thing to do because it can kill love. And you talked about resentment before, that you can build up so much resentment that it can, I mean, this is what, can result in divorce or from estrangement in families, from people cutting and just being like, I can't do it anymore. I cut you off. It would have been much kinder to, with a nice and respectful and loving tone, set a boundary way, way earlier. Am I right about that? I'm seeing it play out in my own life. I'm like, okay, this is not the kind thing to do after all, actually, even though
Yeah.
they're not going to like it. And they might think I'm mean in the moment, but I have to just be like, just trust me, this is the better option.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It is. There is a quote that I heard a while ago, Friedrich Nietzsche, and I know he's problematic for, I'm certainly not endorsing everything he said, but this thing he said really just felt like a bullseye for me. He said, most people prefer dishonest peace over honest conflict.
Yes, true.
And I want to change that a little bit. And I want to say, we only know, or we are taught
Mm,
dishonest peace, and we are not taught honest conflict. And so it's kind of this recipe for disaster because, I'm having to kiss the creepy uncle. I'm having to finish my food. I'm totally disconnected from the sensations in my body. And I'm used to shoving all those down. And then I see the people around me who just want me to be nice and kind. Of course, I don't know how to say, like, hey, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. I don't think I want to keep doing this. And when all of that kind of erupts because of resentment and anger, now I'm the bitchy woman who
mhm,
is just angry all the time. And so we don't get any kind of teaching in how to be honest about what our internal experience is like. And I
mhm,
think one of the most interesting kind of dichotomies about this is that if you ask people who are in relationships with people pleasers, they say things like, It's really hard to talk to Sarah because she never wants to choose the restaurant we go to. She always
Mm,
defers to me. She
mhm,
always says, I don't care what we do. So I feel like I have to make all the decisions. Um, I chose for us to go to see this movie, and then Sarah later she seemed like irritated about it. And I was like, but what happened? And so if you are not the people pleaser, you can't trust that the person is showing up and being honest about their feelings, because we don't know how to. And we think we'll be punished for having strong opinions or making everybody go to the restaurant we want to go to, right? We have all these really not helpful ways of thinking about taking up space and having an opinion. But there just isn't any training on how to be honest. And I will tell you that the friendships I have and the relationship that I now have with my husband, where we can be very honest with each other, is the most safe and
mm,
secure feeling in the world. Because I know that if I call my friend and I say, hey, do you want to go to this movie? And she's like, you know what? I'm not really interested in it. That is the honest truth. And I don't have to worry about it or think
yeah,
about it. Or if we go, I know that she really wants to be there. And it's such a kind of a different way of thinking about it, but being able to be honest. And I will say this, I think one of the most unfair characterizations of people pleasers that I hear a lot is that we are liars, and that
mm,
it's lying to be manipulative or controlling. It's
mm,
not. It's lying because the truth is not yet safe to say.
mm,
We're not safe with ourselves to say it. We beat ourselves up, we criticize, we judge ourselves relentlessly, and we create that lack of safety within ourselves. And in a lot of our relationships, people don't like it when we don't people please. And so we stay in those habits to keep the relationship.
for sure. Especially if that was really strong in our families of origin, right? And in our
Absolutely.
cultures of origin, and we don't know that about the people that we're in relationship with.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't know like how their parents handled it. Well, Sarah, this has been so helpful. I'm wondering if there are any action items or like specific takeaways, even if it's a summary of something that you've already said earlier, if you could leave listeners with just one or two things that would be good starting points, what would they be?
My very favorite is to just take your hands, put them somewhere on your body that feels like loving, connected presence, and just say, I'm here, I'm listening. And just whenever I say that, I feel this like really kind of beautiful melting
Mm,
connection. And I do that multiple times a day. I didn't used to have the practice of it at all. I was the master at ignoring my anxiety, ignoring my sadness. And the way that we begin to build that relationship of trust with our own bodies and our own souls is just by listening. And so even if you can just do it here and there for a little minute, like, I'm here, I'm right here with
mm.
you, I'm listening, I'm interested in you, I want to hear what you have to say. And I realize that sounds a little, like there's a we here, and I think there is, right? there's
There is
there's
for
there's
me.
the me of today, and then there's all the little girls that I've been in the past who were really scared about what it would mean to make other people mad.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, just notice how people pleasing shows up for you without judgment. Because one of the saddest things, I get a lot of women, in their late 30s, 40s, even 50s and 60s, and they're like, what is wrong with me?
Mm,
Why can't I stop this? I know I don't want to do it. My brain says no, my mouth says yes. What is wrong with me? And that is the number one thing that women do to undermine their own safety, is we are our own bullies.
mhm,
And what that means is we're living with that bully 24/7. And if you're not safe with you, you're not safe anywhere. And so just notice when people pleasing comes up, how do I talk to myself? And can I have some compassion for the programming that I'm acting out, and the fact that I'm not a bad person. I am a good person who has been programmed to please. And the only way out, you cannot beat yourself into not people pleasing, because that just piles discomfort on top of discomfort.
Mm,
The only way is to be compassionate and to be open hearted and present with you as a good person who's just living out some programming that doesn't work for you anymore.
hmm. Oh, that's wonderful. Such great advice. And I love that that's actionable and I think so, so useful and relevant for people. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. And as we wrap up, can you just tell listeners where they can find your work?
Absolutely. My Instagram is Sara Fisk Coach, SaraFisk. I have a podcast myself. It's called the Ex Good Girl Podcast.
Love it.
And it's where I do a lot of, sharing ideas. And so those two places. I also have a free Facebook group for women to join if they just want some help along the way. So those are three good places.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for being here today and helping us learn to stop people pleasing. Sarah Fisk, thanks.
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure.